Okay, well, welcome to our little presentation. Today I want to talk to you a little bit, just a very small amount, about my cultural journey. Some of the things that I've found different between coming from the United Kingdom and coming to Korea. So a little bit about myself. My name is Carl Pauline and I come from here, this city called Leeds, which is in the United Kingdom. Leeds is about the same distance from, as it would be between Seoul and Busan. Leeds and London are about the same distance. Now, most people have never heard of Leeds, I've discovered in Korea, but a lot of people have heard of Manchester. The distance between Leeds and Manchester is about 30-40 kilometers, and Manchester is just to the west of Leeds. And if you can imagine the relationship between Gyeongsang-do and Jeollado, then that's similar to Leeds and Manchester. We really don't like each other, so sadly I'm not a big supporter of Manchester United, so let's get rid of Manchester. As I say, Leeds is in the county of Yorkshire. Yorkshire's a very beautiful county. We often refer to it as God's garden. And I went to school in the county of Yorkshire. That's me there in 1984. And Leeds is famous essentially for rugby. We used to be famous for soccer, but these days Leeds United is not so strong. We have a beautiful university and quite a small city in comparison to Seoul. I graduated from Leeds University in law, and after graduating in law I went to work in a law firm and was working in an office, like a little bit like this. And I soon discovered that, offices really don't suit me. I hate being stuck in the office. And eventually it made me ask myself, why am I doing this? People talk about happiness all the time. Well, I was not happy. So I got on one of these and I came here to Seoul. And within a few months, I soon discovered that Korea was having a big effect on me, and I found myself falling in love with Korea. So I stayed, and as each year went past, I found another excuse to stay and another excuse to stay, until eventually I accepted the fact that Korea is where I want to be, and Korea is where I am today. So I've lived in Seoul now since July 2002. This is my hometown area, if you like, in Korea. Sokchon Lake, Sokchon-osu, Olympic Park, some fantastic samgyeopsal restaurants. And I've been teaching essentially business English here for about just over 9 years now. So, my cultural journey, these are just a few little things that I've discovered, a few little differences between the United Kingdom and Ireland, Europe, and Korea. But before I move into that, a very important quotation that I came across was by M. Scott Peck, who is the author of a book called A Road Less Travelled. And he said that we should share our similarities and celebrate our differences. And I think that's really, really important when you're comparing countries. There's no right way or wrong way of doing things, and every country has their own unique ways, and I find them really, really interesting. So I've just taken 3 things that I want to talk to you about today. First one would be transportation. So as I mentioned before, I arrived in Incheon Airport in July 2002, and I needed to go from Incheon over to Sokchon-dong here in Seoul. And one of the things I noticed was that there appeared to be only 3 car colours in Korea: grey, black and white. And I found this one quite interesting. Coming from Europe, we have many, many different colours of cars. We even have pink cars, which you'll see quite frequently, particularly in the big cities. Another thing I discovered was on a Saturday afternoon in Seoul, particularly on the Olympic Expressway, you'll often see quite a big traffic jam, which is fine enough. My parents now live in Ireland, and Ireland is a very quiet country, and this would be a traffic jam on a Saturday afternoon in Ireland. The biggest problem you probably have is sheep. Another thing that I noticed in the transportation, and it was a little bit strange to me at first, was the cell phone culture here in Korea is very big, and it's like everybody's walking around, particularly in 2002, everyone's walking around with a cell phone almost to their ear all the time. And if you ever have the opportunity to travel in Europe, you're going to find a lot of these signs coming through, that cell phones are becoming almost like smoking became about 20 years ago. It's becoming very antisocial, and you will often find signs in buses and trains that say quiet carriage or quiet area, quiet zone, which essentially means switch off your cell phone. And it can be a little bit scary, unusual a little bit when you're traveling around Europe these days. The drinking culture was a very interesting culture when I first came to Korea. Let me just explain a little bit. In England and in Ireland, when we go drinking beer, we tend to stand up. Standing up is a very, very common thing, and so we stand around in a group together with our friends, and we're drinking our beer. And if you've ever seen many Englishmen, quite a lot of Englishmen, they have grown their beer belly, as we call it, their beer belly, and in Korean we often jokingly refer to this as 맥주아기. But there is a reason why most Europeans, Germans, Irish, English people, there's a reason why we grow our beer bellies. Because we stand up in a bar, we have no place to put our beer. But if you grow your beer belly, then you can actually put your beer onto your belly while you're standing. And it's a solution to a problem. So if you see many Europeans with these big bellies, you know they like their beer. Obviously in Korea we like to sit down when we're drinking, and we have a big group of people together. This image here is one from our class party that we had. Another thing, if you're traveling in Europe, you'll find is there's no smoking in public buildings anymore. So you have to go and stand outside if you want to smoke. An interesting thing has happened. People have started using this as an excuse to actually meet and talk to strangers. So you can be outside having a cigarette, and you just start talking to the other smokers. It's becoming like a social club almost. And it's a very, very interesting change that's occurring in Europe. Obviously in bars in Korea at the moment, or still, we can smoke if we wish. Another one that a difference that I found is the 회식. 회식 없어요 in European countries, and indeed in America. I guess we don't like our co-workers as much as Korean people like their co-workers. So people, the idea of having dinner with your co-workers is a little bit strange to us. Actually, I think it's a fantastic idea, but it's something that was new to me when I first came to Korea. Now noraebang, well, noraebang is fantastic, an amazing way to finish off your evening of drinking and eating, and I've had some fantastic nights in noraebang. Quite often in the United Kingdom, when we finish an evening, we tend to go fighting, and city centres are full of police cars flying all over the place because fights have broken out. Now just have a look at the eating and dining culture a little bit. 한정식 is an interesting meal. Today it's one of the best meals I could have. I really enjoy the different flavors and the different textures of the food. But when I first came to Korea, I'm used to like very oily food and not steak and French fries and potatoes and things like this. So coming to Korea and eating Korean food, it took a little while to get used to the taste. And here's actually a very big important tip for any of you guys who have to entertain foreigners when they come to Korea. If it's their first visit to Korea, try not to take them to like 한정식 restaurant. because the taste is very, very unusual to people who've never tried Korean food before, and quite often they just get this, they don't really like it. So it's much better to take them for something like samgyeopsal or galbi, something that's a little bit similar to Western food. Of course, if they're visiting Korea regularly, then of course eventually take them to have 한정식. If I took you out in England, I would probably take you to have wonderful fish and chips, which we are famous for, but I'm pretty sure that if you've never tried fish and chips before, you will find the food quite oily, and maybe you wouldn't like it. One thing I have noticed though is that every foreigner I've entertained in Korea, they absolutely love samgyeopsal. When we go dining, now I mentioned before that 회식 is very rare in European and American countries, but if you're invited out to a company dinner in a Western country, it means you have to bring your wife or you have to bring your husband, whichever situation you're in. A company dinner involves your wife, your family, maybe not girlfriends, but if you are married, you would be expected to bring your wife, but don't bring the children. I'm afraid the children are not usually invited. Just have a quick look at working culture. This was one of the things that I found amazing, and it made me realize just how hard working Korean people are. I call this looking at Korean time versus British time. At 4:45 p.m. in the afternoon in the United Kingdom, you will find people sat at their desks working, answering the telephone. At 5 minutes past 5, the office will be empty. Everyone will have gone home, because 5 o'clock comes, home time, go home, and everyone goes home. What I found in Korea is at 10:50 p.m. quite often people are still in their offices working away. And it's a huge difference between Europe and Korea in terms of your working times. But if somebody was doing that in Europe, you know, staying back until 10:50 p.m., we would very easily start thinking he's got marriage problems. He must be fighting with his wife because he doesn't want to go home. So our thinking is a little bit different. And it always tends to lead us to ask the question, who is the boss? Is it your wife or is it your manager? And that's a very interesting question. If you ask a European, there's no hesitation, the wife. But if you ask a Korean person, quite often they say, the manager. So you find a difference there in terms of what are working. And just to finish off, I have a few little things that I've picked up. Hiking in Korea is a very popular activity, and I've often gone climbing mountains myself here in Korea, and I find particularly on a weekend it can be very, very busy. If you went climbing in the United Kingdom, if you went to the mountains, you might find 1 or 2 people out there, but you certainly wouldn't find hundreds of people. And in Ireland, well, you'd be lucky to find anybody. One thing that for some reason foreigners always misunderstand this one. If they see 2 girls walking down the street holding hands, foreigners tend to think that that looks a little bit odd to them. But obviously once you start to learn about what the reasons behind it, it's like it's a very close friendship, then there's no problem. But foreigners visiting to Korea always tend to misunderstand this one. Finally, one more thing, and this is more of a personal thing, is elevators. When I first came to Korea, and there's this little story here, I find elevators very dangerous in Korea. When I first came to Korea, where I was working was on the 11th floor, and we were teaching children at that time. And the children's classes finished at 6:20 in the evening. One evening I was arriving for work for my class, which started at 6:30. I got into the elevator round about 6:20, went up to the 11th floor. Now my habit being English was to stand right at the back of the elevator. What happened was, as soon as the doors opened on the 11th floor, all the children went straight into the elevator, and I got pinned to the back. And I ended up having to go all the way back down to the first floor. It was certainly eye-opening for me, and I learned my lesson. Now I stand right at the front of the elevator, ready to get out. English culture is very much, we love to queue. We really enjoy standing in line, or as we say in England, to queue. And Americans often make a joke about the English, saying, how can you tell a group of English people? Because they're always standing in line. So there was just a few of the things that I noticed are different between Korea and England when I first came here. But it's very important to stress that there's no right or wrong way, there's no rude, nothing is more rude or less rude. It's all about sharing our similarities and celebrating our differences, because that's the important thing to understand. No country is the same. Every country has slightly different customs, slightly different culture, and that's one of the things that we should celebrate, because that's what makes the world an awesome place. And I find that is what really makes traveling and experiencing new cultures one of the best experiences that you can have. So that's just a few things that I've picked up over the years that I've lived here in Korea. I hope you enjoyed this, and thank you very much.